I'm very happy to be here. Um, Today I'll be talking about online data acquisition. This is the agenda that I prepared for today. I'm going to be talking about why to collect online data and to talk a little bit about the importance of selecting a platform for your research, how to access online data. Then I will talk about some of the examples that are easily accessible online. And then I'll summarize the main takeaways of this presentation. Before that, I would like to clarify what do I mean with online data. It's very general. I mean all these terms that sometimes are heard in research: web data, digital behavioral data, social media data, and online annotated data. It's basically any data that you can find online and you can download online. So why to collect online data? Because online platforms are shaping society. For example, they mediate human communication. Think about the 140 characters limit that Twitter imposed at the beginning uh, of their existence, and how later in 2017 they changed this limit to 280 characters. Think about how that mediates the communication in that platform and how many people use that platform to communicate. Think about the use that politicians give to the platform. There is this example of three accounts: Deutsche Bundestag in YouTube, Bundestag in Twitter, and the Bundestag in TikTok. The Bundestag in TikTok actually has more followers than the one in Twitter, except that the Bundestag in TikTok is not a real official account. This was disclosed by the Mozilla Foundation last week. And it's worth reminding that the elections was just on Sunday, last Sunday. Um, and this account was being used to post more content related to the right-wing populist party, the AfD. There is more things that Mozilla disclosed in this article that you can go after and read about it. Online platforms are also information gatekeepers. For example, a lot of people access Google for health advice. And in general, we receive daily algorithmic recommendations and advertising of news, products, job offers, job applicants, insurances, and even hotels and everything pretty much. When it comes to selecting a platform for your research, think about different things that will affect this decision. Think about which population is represented in the platform that you are selecting, the types of interactions that are important for your research questions, one-to-many or one-to-one, short or long interactions. Which interactions rules are important? For example, the one of Twitter, the 140 characters, or are you looking for a long text? Does the platform provide access to the data you need? Sometimes they don't even give you that access. And if not, can you get the data in a different way? Is there alternatives? And if so, is it legal or ethical to do so? And there was a presentation in this series by colleagues about this topic. I won't be addressing this topic in this presentation, but it's important to take it into account. And in general, you should be careful with the way that you collect the data. There was another presentation by colleagues in this series that addressed this topic as well. So how to access online data? There is multiple ways of accessing online data. If you get lucky, you might find the perfect repository. All the data is in one repository. You just have to download it and use it. You might actually get direct access to the company's servers and have the data at your disposal. You can also ask individuals to donate the data. For example, you can ask them to download their Facebook data or their WhatsApp data and give it to you. And you can web scrape or crawl data, and I'll be talking more about this later, as well as web APIs. You can also web track participants. You can basically observe their behavior while they are browsing on their computers and upload that to a server, or also you can do that in mobile phones. Or you can automatize browsers and use that automatization process to collect the data. You can even do this on individuals' computers to see, for example, personalization of results in their computers. Now, as I said, I'll be talking more about web scraping and web crawling, but in particular, I'll be talking more about web APIs. The reason is that although for web scraping, you can get what you can see on your computer, and you can basically anything that is in the browser, you can upload it and extract it from there. Whereas with web APIs, you are limited to what the platform provides you. Web scraping requires much more programming. It gets messy, and there is a lot of debugging related to it. But moreover, you might often be violating terms of conditions, and the API itself can prevent you to download more than what you are allowed to. So I will explain the difference between web scraping and web crawling first. For web scraping, you usually start with a URL list of websites that you are interested in. You program a bot script that is going to go through that list and obtain all the websites that are on the servers on the internet, download them. And usually, or for web scraping, what you're going to do with the data, with those HTMLs, is going to be to extract something that you're interested in. For example, you can extract images from those websites, or you can extract advertising or Facebook posts. Now, with web crawling, everything is the same to that point, but you're going to concentrate on extracting URLs. And what you're going to do with those URLs is add them to the list so that the bot also visit those new sites that you discover in the new websites, in the websites that you already crawled. The robot in this case is usually called Spider or a web crawler, and this is where the concept of crawling the web comes from. Now, APIs, application programming interfaces, or web APIs more specifically for this case, offer a very different story. Think about a Twitter programmer that programs the whole Twitter platform, and as part of that programming task, they program a series of services, and this list of services is what we call the API. The Twitter programmer is going to create a documentation about those services, and this is called the API references, that then is going to be used by another, in this case, let's say a Twitter web developer, to create a client or the website of Twitter. And with that documentation, she knows that the services that are available and can access the platform. Now, the important thing here is that the purpose of APIs is to coordinate communication between programs and not to provide data to researchers. And this has a series of implications when it comes to use APIs. The first one is that it has a query system with a lot of parameters, and usually it can get quite complicated. You would need some programming skills, and this is why it's usually called API scraping as well. The data is not going to be tabulated, such as Excel or a CSV. Instead, it's going to be something a bit more obscure, like JSON or XML. Also, the results are going to come in chunks. You're going to get 100 rows every time that you request information. And by rows here in quotes, it's actually entities, the correct term. And you're going to have limits of how many requests you can do per amount of time. Now, these APIs are getting more common, and even for providing data. And in my opinion, most of these things are not really requirements for downloading data. And technically speaking, there is no reason for them to be there. In reality, this is, in my opinion, what it could be reduced to. And there is at least one example of a platform that has managed to do this and even built a graphical interface on top of it. This platform is called CrowdTangle. And before entering into more details, CrowdTangle collects data from Facebook, Instagram, and Reddit. CrowdTangle actually currently belongs to Facebook. And the usual workflow with CrowdTangle is you are going to create and curate a list of accounts related to a specific topic that you are interested on. And you're going to use it to browse and to get the content posted by the accounts. So here's an example of basically newspapers, online newspapers. And you can basically browse all the posts that are being submitted at a time. You can also search on that, on the post, on the content of those accounts. You can import and export, this time tabulated data. You can also create interactive plots. And there is also an API. But here the API is again to build programs. And then you are going to be confronted with all the things that I mentioned before, all the restrictions that I mentioned before. So there is really very little reasons to use the API instead of the dashboards in this case. Now, one of the things that you have to be aware with CrowdTangle is that there is quite a few items on list of what you can get and what you cannot get. For example, you cannot get common text or demographic data. You cannot get private posts and profiles. In general, you should make sure that when you start a research project, you check that you actually can get what you need with CrowdTangle. And finally, CrowdTangle also offers an academic access. And it's a very simple form in which you only have to fill up what your research is about and how you are going to use the data. Now, what I'm going to do is compare three platforms in more traditional APIs, let's say, and the difference between them in different dimensions. The first dimension is what would these platforms be best for? So in the case of Twitter, I would say that they are best to study communication of influencers. The reason is that, for example, the most prolific 10% of users create 80% of the tweets. On top of that, the traditional media usually follow and propagate tweets of personalities. One of the most common is politicians, in which there is work at the department in topic saliences and communication networks. YouTube, in comparison, could be better suited for exploring and investigating engagement and content popularity. It's the second most visited website and the second biggest social network. It does not strongly encourage being logged into the platform to watch the content, so it has a broader audience. It's also very used to watch news online. 19% of US adults consider it an important way of doing it. There is also presence of traditional media in YouTube. Usually newspapers or television channels post videos on YouTube as well. And it captures some of the TV consumer market, as many smart TVs come with it in their listings or in their options. Now, Reddit tells a very different story here. It's best to study the emergence of moderation rules. Before entering on the why, let's just clarify, because perhaps not everybody is familiar with Reddit. Reddit is structured in something that is called subreddits, that are topical communities. There's more than 100,000 active. And the important thing is that each of those communities have their individual norm and cultures and moderation practices that are decided by moderators who are volunteers. If there is no moderator, there is no community. And Reddit has also been home to organize events. For example, controversial ones, such as the Boston City bombing or the GameStop market manipulation. Also, Reddit has not only been used for negative things, it has been used for positive things as well. But is this a structure that is interesting of moderators and rules? What makes it a very relevant platform to study these kind of things? Now, there is also things of demographics that you have to consider. For example, the usage of Twitter in Germany is quite low. 5% of the population in 2017, older than 60 years old, were using Twitter. In the case of YouTube, this is a broader audience, as I mentioned before, and there is not much evidence that this is too skewed towards certain population groups. And in the case of Reddit, I would say that subreddit members are usually very engaged. It's common to find very long threads with very long posts about different topics. Now, those are not by a long shot the only things that you can study in those platforms. For example, for Twitter, there is other examples such as election prediction, migration movements, depression, and hate speech. And many more. Twitter is probably the most studied platform. It has been even called the model organism in reference of the fruit fly that is used in biology. For YouTube, sentiment of captions and transcripts and time series analysis on the content are also common, but also misinformation, news spreading, recommendation systems, topics such as filter bubbles and radicalizations have been quite common, and also toxicity of the comments that are posted. For Reddit, I found was pointed to literature reviews that highlight these topics, for example, community governance and moderation, that's related to what I talked in the previous slide, but also things like health science, mental health, depression, eating disorders. And part of the presence of these topics here is because Reddit, to a certain degree, has a good share of anonymous accounts. And then people are very open about these types of topics in the platform. Now, finally, I'm also going to try to compare these platforms in terms of the APIs that they offer, the access to the data that they offer. In the case of Twitter, there is a special access for academics, and you just have to submit a form very similar to the one of CrowdTangle. For YouTube and Reddit, the access is very easy. You just need to have an account, Google or Reddit, depending on which one you are going to use. For the academic access of Twitter, you are limited to 10 million tweets. For YouTube, you are limited to 10,000 units per day. And this is also a common terminology when you go to certain APIs. They talk about units, and then you have to translate that to what you actually need. For example, that can be translated to 10,000 videos if you have let's say, the direct link to that video. Or 5,000 videos if you use the search functionality inside YouTube. But then you also have to think about comments and stuff like that. It is quite limited, but it's not little, especially if you start collecting data with time. Reddit, have a simple limit of 60 requests per minute. That translates to 2.6 millions per month. It can be more data when you think that you can retrieve several posts at the same time, so it compares to the academic access of Twitter, for example. Twitter and YouTube are well documented, and there's lots of resources and examples of them. Reddit, there is a space for improvement, and that space has been taken by a platform that is called PushShift, that I'll be talking about in the next slide. In general, Twitter and YouTube also offers a fairly complete access to the data. For Twitter, you can access likes, follows, retweets, full text search, which is probably what you expect. And for YouTube, comments, dislikes, favorites, views, subscribers, searches by term, channels, categories. Now, the categories are quite interesting because it's the person that uploads the video who categorizes the video according to what the audience they are targeting, if they are targeting news or comedy. So it's fairly consistent, at least from the perspective of the person that uploads the video. In the case of Reddit, everything is accessible, but it is not so easy to navigate. However, Reddit is very open regarding the use of the content. For example, if you want to compare Twitter to Reddit, in regard the deletion of tweets and the right to be forgotten story, Twitter does not allow you to reshare tweets or large amount of tweets in any case. It instead encourages to only share the IDs of the tweet, so that you have to go directly to the Twitter platform to download the full tweet. Reddit will simply, if Reddit gets a request to delete a tweet, it's going to delete it from their platform, but they don't care if it is copied anywhere else. In general, they don't care if the whole Twitter is copied somewhere else, and it actually is copied somewhere else. It's copied in this platform that is called PushShift. PushShift collect live data since 2015 from Reddit, and retroactively have that data set that goes to 2005. It's even easier to get access. You don't even need an account. It offers full text search. It's easy to use and well organized, easy to understand the organization. It's possible to find, remove, and moderated posts and comments for the reasons that I explained before when I compared this to Twitter. They will delete Reddit information only if PushShift gets the request for that information to be deleted. And then you can also access the raw data that are accessible for downloading. The platform is free, it's donation based. So that sort of gives an idea of how different the platforms are when it comes to studying different topics and the possibilities that you are and the restrictions that you have when you use different platforms. I'm going to present other two cases, very different cases from the others. One is Wikipedia, and we tend to think about Wikipedia just as an encyclopedia, but in reality it's a social network of collaboration as well. There is 120,000 active editors per month just in the English Wikipedia. There is also the Wikipedia page talks, where there is discussions about the changes that are in the content of Wikipedia. There is, of course, the record of all the revisions since 2001 of every change that has been done in Wikipedia. The content is supported with references, and colleagues and I have some work on the evolution of these references that are associated to the content in Wikipedia. And there is a myriad of APIs and tools associated to it to analyze statistics, knowledge base, classification systems, and also tracking change, where also our department have some work on. Wikipedia is also very relevant for NLP systems for machine learning, and of course has a free API, and you can also directly download the the dumps of all the changes of Wikipedia as well. The next one is Common Crawl. This is not as well known as Wikipedia. I explained before what's web crawling, and if you intend to crawl the whole internet, you probably don't need to do that because it's already been done by Common Crawl. They take a monthly internet snapshot since 2013, and we're talking about massive amounts of data, petabytes of historical web pages. So again, this is free to use, so it's donation-based. Now, due to its size, it's not the most user-friendly system. It's important to know that it's there because there is multiple use cases. For example, one can use it to mine all content related to specific topics. Think about climate change and looking how climate change was perceived on the internet in 2015. The evolution of internet in general, how the structure of internet has evolved over time to create networks. Also to find dead links or links that doesn't exist anymore. And in general, it has been used as a corpus for natural language processing. And finally, I will be talking about other type of API that is also related to data, which are annotations APIs. And I'll be talking first about the Perspective API that is used to score and classify comments in terms of toxicity, insults, profanity, identity attack, threat, sexually explicit. So it's very used for moderating comments, but obviously important in research as well. It's available in different languages. It is free to use as well. It offers 1 query per second, though this limit can be increased if requested. One of the things that is important with any annotation system that you use online is to evaluate the performance in your data set, take a small sample, and make sure that it's working properly. Perspective is provided by Jigsaw, which is under Google management. That is also important and relevant to know. Amazon Recognition is another annotation API. It's helpful to tag images and videos. For example, general labels of objects, cars, vehicles, mountains. It takes basically elements, important elements that are pictures. It also detects texts. It can be used for face analysis. It tells you if the person that is in the picture, well, it detects the face, of course, and if the person is happy, if they has the eyes open, so if it is using glasses. It also recognizes celebrities. And it offers coordinates, so one can calculate the area and distance between objects. That one can calculate, for example, the face-to-body ratio. Amazon Web Services have a free trial for 1 year, in which you can do 5,000 requests per month to the Amazon Recognition API. And after that is $1 per 1,000 images, which is arguably very cheap. Again, it could be biased, so evaluate the labels and evaluate what the API recognized in the picture. Now, the advantage here is that it's very quick. Humans are very quick to evaluate the performance in visual systems, whereas tagging elements can be time consuming. For example, cropping faces, it would be a super long task, but checking if the crop of that face was done properly, it takes 1 second for a human. Now, AWS provides other types of annotations, such as text analysis, OCR, including tabulated data that it's going to put in the right format, voice recognition, and in reality, I'm just talking about AWS because I have used it a little bit, but there is all these companies, Google, Azure, and IBM, have their corresponding versions of these services that I just mentioned. There is also Clarifai that It has a good market share in the area of visual recognition. You can also annotate domains or URLs, and there's Amazon Web Shrinker and Classify that try to classify URLs, and it's a very common task when you work with web data. And there's many more APIs to access data. There's search engine APIs, there's governmental data, international agencies, news organizations, scholarly archives and journals, metadata of data, music, you name it, there's probably an API related to the data that you are looking for, not necessarily free, but if you dig enough into the internet, you are going to find information about it. Now, to summarize, there's lots of possibilities to explore different research questions. The platform that you choose for your research matters, and always give a good thought to this. The APIs were not meant for research to access data. It was researchers who started to creatively scraping them to get the data that they needed for their research. APIs offer access to machine learned models through these annotations APIs. If you have a boring annotation task, look for an API. Chances are that you will find something for it. And if you do, don't forget to evaluate the annotations of that API. I would like to thank to my to my colleagues at the CS department who helped me with a previous version of this presentation. In particular, I would like to thank to Mattia, Indira, Olga, and Maria, who took their time to talk to me, and also to Johannes Breuer, who checked my slides on CrowdTangle. Thank you.